Welcome back to another LP Gallery tutorial. Today we are going to be talking about creating abstract patterns using the artistic effects. And this is going to be useful for those of you who are looking for something different for your fill. You're getting a little tired of the gradients and the solid colors and the textures and the pattern lines. You want something different. So we're going to show you how to create an unlimited supply of great abstract patterns you can use in your shapes and in your text. Okay, so let's take a look here. We have 8 typical PowerPoint objects. We have a solid color rectangle, a gradient, a texture, pattern lines. We have 2 photographs, and I've got 2 photographs to show you that each photograph creates a different pattern. So if you've got 5,000 photographs on your computer, each one of them is going to make 5,000 different patterns. So every picture creates a different pattern. And then we have here a nice smart art object, and we have a chart. Now, would you normally convert a smart art object into a pattern? Probably not, but you can. As a matter of fact, just about anything that you can insert into PowerPoint, you can convert into a nice abstract pattern, and they're all going to be different. There's literally an unlimited number of abstract patterns you can create. Okay, so let's take a look. The second column you see here is one of the patterns created by that object. So the blue rectangle created this pattern, and I inserted it into text. So you see what it looks like in a shape, and you see what it looks like in text. So it applies to all of this. So the gradient created that, and you see what the text, the texture, etc., etc. Now, when you get to the photographs, you can see that we have 2 different pictures, and they created 2 different patterns. So again, your photographs will create a different pattern because the image is different. Now, most of you are probably used to using artistic effects on photographs. So you mostly use the artistic effect to take a photograph into more of an artistic rendering, maybe with a little bit of watercolor effect or a drawing effect. We're actually going to be doing the very reverse. What we want to do is actually obliterate the image in the photographs. We don't want them there because if they're there, then you're going to be able to see them. And to create something abstract, the image has to be removed. We're going to actually work with the artistic effects very differently than what you're used to. And that's what creates these great, nice abstract patterns. Now, the next question you're going to say is this. Well, artistic effects only works with photographs. How do you get it to work on the shapes? Well, you can't get it to work directly on the shapes. You have to convert the shapes into a picture. And what do you have to do with that? Well, you just copy the shape, paste special, picture. That's it. So we have to convert each one of these, all these shapes, into a picture and then apply the artistic effects to it. Now, what we're going to be doing is taking kind of a Photoshop approach to this. Those of you who worked in Photoshop know that you layer your effects to create your ultimate result. So you're going to have adjustment layers and layer styles and blending modes, and you're stacking everything on top of each other to get that perfect result that you want. Now, PowerPoint obviously does not have any of those tools to do that kind of work, but we can simulate the layering effects quite well in PowerPoint. So not as good as Photoshop, but certainly a lot easier to do in Photoshop. Now, any of these things you see here, if I was to take something like this and create this in Photoshop, I'm going to be there for a while. Now, to create this in PowerPoint took maybe 15, 20 seconds. So this is what I'm talking about. You're going to be amazed at these abstract patterns you're going to be creating, and they're only going to take seconds to create. So in Photoshop, you're spending quite a bit of time to create these. In PowerPoint, it's a matter of seconds to create these fantastic abstract looking shapes. Now in some of these, I've even added a bit of a 3D to it. So for example, you look at these 2 down here, you can see that they're kind of a nice 3D pattern. And same with this. So what you see here is big, thick blobs of paint. So I didn't want it all to be flat, and you can apply a 3D effect. Again, that's just done through the artistic effects to give certain nice patterns a nice 3D effect. It just adds another dimension to your abstract patterns. Now that doesn't work with all patterns, but certain patterns can give you a nice little bit of a 3D effect. In this video, I'm just going to show you just examples of how we do this and how we insert the abstract patterns into the shape or text. So right now we're just going to do the preliminaries, and in the next video, we're going to actually put it all together. So let me just show you some examples using each one of these shapes. Okay, so here we have the blue rectangle shape, and all of these are created from that blue rectangle. Now I've got them inserted into text, some of these, so you can see what they look like in text. Now again, I'm creating things mostly to be inserted into text, but it doesn't matter whether you put them into shape or text. So again, all of these are created just with that blue rectangle. Okay, now the last row that you see here, I've added a plastic wrap. You might have looked at plastic wrap effect and wondered, what is it used for? Well, on certain patterns, it works really well. It gives it a three-dimensional effect. So you can see that here. So I've taken this one here and I've added the plastic wrap to it. So it kind of looks a little bit 3D. So I'm going to show you a little bit about the plastic wrap because I think on certain effects, it works out really quite well. Okay, so again, this is a blue rectangle, and these are all created using just the blue rectangle. Now, this is the gradient, and these are all the effects created with the gradient. So a great variety, and that's just one kind of gradient, okay? No matter what gradient you use, you're going to create a different effect. So you can imagine the possibilities when you're using different gradients. Okay, again, we got that in the text. You see it looks pretty good in the text. The last row here, again, has a nice little plastic wrap. And you can see I've added it to this one here. I kind of like that. It kind of looks like melted gummy bears or something like that in there. So it's kind of nice. Again, the plastic wrap doesn't work with everything, but it's kind of a nice effect. Okay, so here's our texture. And again, this is all what's created with that one little wood texture. And last row's got the plastic wrap, and you can see it how it looks in the text. Now here's our pattern lines. Now we're going to do a separate video just on the pattern lines. Now pattern lines is probably one of the least fills that are used by people. It goes back to the old days of PowerPoint, but it creates phenomenal abstract patterns. And we're going to do a video just on the pattern fills here so you can see what they do. So here we have the red and white stripe, and here's all the abstract patterns we created just with that one. So very interesting. And again, we have a plastic wrap in the bottom. We add it to here. Looks kind of nice. Looks three-dimensional. And finally, we have our photo. So you can see with this photo that all of these are based on the photo. Here we have the truck in the middle, and you can see, we can see the pattern of the truck in there. Okay. Now, nobody knows that's a truck. So we try to obliterate the image, and then we create the abstract pattern. And that's basically what we're doing here. So we're getting rid of the image and creating a nice pattern. Now I'm going to try to go mostly for watercolor patterns and painterly type patterns, but there's all kinds of patterns you can create here like this. So we're going to see that there's a lot of different patterns you can create. And again, we got the plastic wrap on the last row, and you can see what it looks like in the text. So let's give you a quick rundown on how this works. So here's our basic PowerPoint shapes again. We have our rectangle, solid color, gradient, texture, pattern, and we have our two photographs. Now, each one of these have been converted into pictures. So I've taken each one of these shapes, converted into a picture so that we can apply the artistic effects to it. So let's take a look. So I've applied a glow edge to the rectangle, and you get a dark color. I've applied a glow edge to this gradient. Doesn't do very much. Texture doesn't do very much. Texture doesn't do very much, and the pattern just changes a bit, but it applies to the photographs. Now here's how it works. When you're using the artistic effects, they work best on photographs because a photograph is very textured, and these artistic effects need that texture to modify and change. So when you have a solid color, nothing's going to happen, and a gradient, very little happens. So a lot of the artistic effects really requires a pattern on the object so that it can really modify it. Okay, so let's take a look at paintbrush. So paintbrush applied to a rectangle, that's a solid color, doesn't do anything. A gradient, not much. In the texture, it's kind of softens it. You get a different angled lines, and it works really well on the photographs again. So it needs that texturing in the photograph to really work with it. Now the last one here is the line drawing. Now the line drawing is exceptionally useful when creating these abstract patterns, especially when you grab the slider bar all the way to the right so you get these lines. So normally when you do that to a photograph, you wonder what the point is, but it's really good for what we're doing here. So you can see by applying a line drawing to that, I get these angled lines, and it definitely doesn't look like the blue rectangle anymore. It now has a pattern. That means a lot of the artistic effects can now work on this pattern. So let's take a look here. We have a gradient and nice pattern. You can even use that into a text or fill just like that. That's beautiful in itself. You can see what happens with the texture, and again, you can see with the pattern lines, and now we get to the photographs. Okay, so again, the idea is to obliterate what was there before so that we can apply artistic effects to it. So you see this now. You may have done that to a photograph and wondered, what is the point of that? That doesn't even look good, but it does for what we need it to do. Now, I've also done this. We're not just applying artistic effects to this, we're also modifying their colors and their brightness and contrast. So every time we do that, we modify the color and the brightness and contrast to change it from the original object so it doesn't look like the original object. So every time we do this, we're trying to change the color, We're adjusting the brightness and contrast to make it either brighter or a little darker, whatever. So we're doing three things. We're doing the artistic effect plus the color and brightness and contrast. So three things we're doing at the same time on these. Okay, so now I've got a nice pattern here and I can work with that. So the artistic effects can work with these patterns. So what we would do is copy and paste as a picture. And that's what happened here. This is the second image. So I take the line drawing, copy and paste it as a picture. Now I'm applying a glow edge. A glow edge is a really good one to really break up the pattern. If you want to get rid of the image entirely, glow edge is perfect for that. Now glow edge gives us this on the gradient and the texture, the line pattern, and of course on the photographs. So again, you can see that glow edge will act differently depending what the base object is. So all of these have a line pattern to them, but look at the effects. They're all different. I like to create watercolor effects or painterly effects when I put them into my shapes or into the text. So I could use the glow edges like that, but I would take it one more step. So what I would do is copy and paste this as a picture, and then I would apply something like paintbrush. Paintbrush is one of my favorite artistic effects. And look, it does a nice job on photographs, but it's exceptionally good creating watercolor effects. So we take this, we copy and paste it, and we apply paintbrush. And you can see that looks really nice. It's a nice watercolor effect. Same thing here. It looks more like a watercolor effect all the way down here. Like I say, I'm more of a fan of the watercolor effect, so I always take it one more step into things like paintbrush. Paintbrush isn't the only watercolor effect we could use. There's several more we can use. Again, they'll change the pattern itself. So that's how we do it. So we have to break up the pattern somehow. Usually line drawing is a pretty good place to start. It's not the only effect to start with, but it's one of the most common. So again, the first idea is to break up the original image, get a pattern in there so the artistic effects can work on the pattern. Now the next thing I want to show you is just, again, the difference between the glow edge and the paintbrush. So the top row is the glow edge, and I've got the same pattern into the text. So again, I'm making most of these for text, not necessarily for shapes. And you can see that they look really, really, really good in text. It's really quite dynamic, but I always like to take that extra step. So I apply the paintbrush. So here it is again, the rectangles of the paintbrush. And now we take a look at the text. You can see it's a little more watercolor. I find it to be a little more interesting. Now this one here, I've added a little bit of a 3D to it. So you can see it looks like thick blobs of paint, and this one too. So I've added a bit of a 3D, and that's actually just the artistic effect called cement. And if you just play with the parameters, you got to take the parameters really low. It gives you a bit of a 3D effect. So it looks like big blobs of paint on a wall or something like that. A nice artistic effect. How do you put the abstract fill into a shape or text? And there's two ways to do it. There's a stretch and there's a tile. So here's a stretch option. So if you just paste one of these effects into shape or text, it automatically stretches it. So here's the basic one we used. Here's the size of the one we used. And I pasted into all of these. Okay. So it stretches to fill the shape. So in this one here, you can see that I've rotated it. I've taken this shape, I've rotated it so the yellow's on the bottom, and I paste it in here. Then I rotate it again, paste it so the yellow's on the right, and then yellow's on the top. So you might say, well, why would you rotate and paste? Why not just rotate the shape itself? Well, it's fine to do this to the shape, but what about text? If I want the yellow to be at the bottom, I have to rotate it. Now, if I were to rotate the text is going to be upside down. So that's why I would rotate the pattern and then paste it into the object. Just in case you're using text, you obviously can't rotate the text. So one shape will give you 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways of inserting it into the object. Okay, now, this is what most of you do. You stop at this point because there's no reason to do anything else. So you put it into the shape and that's it. So you have a photograph. You might put your photograph in your text. You might put it in your shape, and then that's where you end. With the abstract pattern, that's just the beginning. So in this row here, what I've done is taken that shape and I've cropped it. So we have just this right here. And when you do that, you get a deeper stretch. You get a very long stretch. Now, when you do that, you have to make sure that this has enough detail and sharpness that it's not going to blur out or get fuzzy. So you always have to make sure when you're doing your patterns and you want it to fit into text, so technically your patterns should be at least the size of your text, so that they don't stretch too much. If you make a very tiny pattern and stretch it to fill the text, you will see the softness or the fuzziness of that stretch, and it won't look very good. So keep that in mind. The PowerPoint is going to stretch this to fit. So if the pattern is very tiny and the object's very big, it is not going to look very good. It's going to look very fuzzy. It's going to look maybe pixelated. So it's going to look like it's not right. So make sure that the pattern isn't too tiny when you do the stretch, or it's not going to look good. Okay, so here I've cropped this, and you can see, again, I've rotated. So this goes in here and it stretches down. You can see the yellow stretch down. And then I've rotated it, so you can see yellow at the bottom, yellow's to the right, yellow's to the top. So again, 4 ways of doing that. Now the next one here, I've just gone here and cropped a different angle. So I've cropped so we get this part right here. Okay, and I'm going to repeat. And you can see that each time we're cropping this, it looks different. And I'm doing the rotation again. Okay, and then here I've cropped it at a different angle, taken this one here and done the same thing. And then here I've cropped it very thin, just got the pink, and I did that. So again, that one shape gives you a lot of variety. So what we have here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have 20 different ways of doing this with just one shape. So in the rectangle, it doesn't look too bad, but where this really shines, what we've done over here, is in the text. If you look at the text and you look at the stretch in there, especially with these, it's phenomenal. Beautiful watercolor patterns. Again, and you wouldn't know it was the same object. They all look different. So phenomenal. So just keep in mind that if you're going to stretch something like this, a small pattern like this into here, it should be of a good size so that it doesn't lose the clarity. Okay, you don't want a really tiny pattern to stretch. So anyways, that's a stretch. So again, that's using the object, rotating the object, and then cropping it many different ways so that we can use the same object over and over again. So this is why I'm telling you that you have an unlimited supply of patterns. Even one object can create all these different patterns. Now the next way to get a pattern into a shape or text is by tiling. And PowerPoint has 4 ways to do that. So let's take a look at this. In order for this to work, the pattern has to be smaller than the shape. So here's our pattern. Here's our shape. We have a large rectangle and large text. So when we insert this into the shape or text, PowerPoint by default will just repeat the pattern. Okay, so we have 4 options here. So you can see all 4 here. The default is just to insert the shape and have it repeat the tile over and over. The next option is called a horizontal. And a horizontal means that it just flips it. So it goes this way and then flips that tile this way. So it mirrors the horizontal. So you kind of get rows. The next way is vertical. So it takes the tile and it flips it down, not across, it flips it down. So you get columns and then it reverses that. And the last way is to do both, where it flips horizontally and vertically until you get a pattern like that. So it looks pretty good. Now, I've used this striped pattern deliberately so that you could see the edges. You're not always going to see it this way if you use different patterns. If you use the painterly patterns that are more speckled, they're going to blend a lot better, a lot smoother, and they'll give you more of a kaleidoscope effect. So again, I've used these lines, which makes the edges of the pattern very obvious. So again, every pattern you use is going to be different, so they're not always going to look quite like this. Okay, so let's see how this works. So we have none, mirror horizontal, mirror vertical, and mirror both. So let's see how that works. So I'm going to take this one here, and I'm going to make a copy. I'm going to show you how all of these actually work. By default, your pattern starts at the top left. It says so right here under alignment. So it's starting at the top left of the shape. Now it could start a lot of different ways. And if you play with this, it alters the pattern, shifts the pattern. Actually, it's kind of interesting to play with this because you can really extend your pattern just by altering it left or right or up or down. Okay, so this is how it works. This is top left. So that means the pattern starts at the top left before it mirrors. Okay, so this starts at the top left. Okay, so to do a mirror, all it does is take this, flips it, and it will go and rotate horizontally. And you have that. So you can see that pattern right there. Now I'm going to do that one here. I'll just go here and I'll tell it to go mirror type horizontally, and there's your pattern. You can see it. So it's creating rows. Now to do the vertical pattern, let me just click there and I'll tell it to go vertical. It's going to go down. So again, it starts with the top left and it goes down. So I take this one, I duplicate it, and go to Format. I'm going to rotate vertically, and it does that. Now to do both, so I'm going to click there, go back here, tell it to do both. And basically it's just taking this one again, flipping it here, and it's rotating it. and you get something like that. Now, you can obviously create your own pattern, do this yourself, and then place them to shapes. That actually gives you a little more options if you do that. So if you create your own pattern, you don't really need to go both because the pattern is already established in there. And then you also get the opportunity to rotate it. So if I were to group all this, now, in order for this to happen, I got to make sure everything's lined up perfectly. If you don't line up your patterns, you're going to get these small, thin lines in it. So I'll just group this. I'm going to rotate it. Okay, and I can take that and I can place it into here. If I take that, copy it, go into here, and tile it, I've got it at both. I'm going to take it to none. And you can see none and both really don't make much of a difference. It doesn't really make much difference because we already have a tile pattern. So this makes a very interesting pattern. So you can actually create your own patterns and put them into the shape or text, and that gives you more options to play with. And I'll just put that back. So that's how the tile pattern works. Now you also have this option here. Let me just go back and take this one, and let me just put that back in there. I'll tile it and I'll say both. So we got a nice pattern. Okay, now watch this. I can also make this pattern a lot smaller. So you see under scale, by default it's 100%. So I can extend this pattern by making it smaller. So let's say I make 50% on both of those. And now we get a different pattern entirely. So you have one abstract pattern that you put in here, and you can tile it many different ways. And again, just by adjusting the scale, you are going to make it look different. So you can extend the pattern and reuse it many different ways. Okay, the last thing I'm going to show you is actually working with the tile patterns. So here we have a bunch of different tile patterns. I've got all these set to both so that they kind of mirror each other pretty nice. So I've taken this tile pattern, I've cropped it, and I put it to here, and you can see what you get when you do that. So again, remember, you got the ability to crop these, and this changes what the pattern looks like. So here's the same pattern going vertically. Looks different. Now I've cropped it at a different angle, more of a square, get a different pattern, and you can see that here. So I've cropped it again differently, rotated that, get a different pattern, made this one more around the red and the orange, got that. And here's where I scaled the pattern. So I scaled them down to 50% and you get something like that. So again, that one little pattern, if you play with it and crop it and rotate and things of that nature, that means that one pattern can be reused over and over and over again and not look the same. You can extend those patterns for many uses because they will always look a little different. Anyways, that's our goal, and that's what we're going to be doing. So the next video, we're going to actually start creating our abstract patterns. Now, again, we're not going to create tons of them. We're going to just give you a couple examples of each one of the basic PowerPoint shapes so you get an idea how to do this. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you stay tuned for the next part where we actually put it together. If you liked it, give it a like, and we'll catch you in the next video.